let's talk about this full moon in Aquarius. This one's gonna be, it's probably the English one's gonna probably be shorter than the Spanish one. So let's get to it. It's now morning. So there's this to me is a full moon of patterns, of shapes, of combinations, of aspects. There's an expected change in job or work situation for a lot of us. Expected, possibly finding love on a trip if you are very young or if you are old. Um, it should be happening during a time of emotional insatisfaction, but also emotional outpouring and release. Because you see, it isn't just the sun forming an opposition to the moon, which is what makes a full moon, but we have a T square with the focal point being Uranus and Taurus. So establishing a balance between shining authentically, joyfully, with, I don't know, games and fun on the one hand, and on the other, keeping an emotional distance so that we can regulate our emotions, so that we can handle our emotions logically, rationally, is probably something that's going to happen by accident due to material circumstances that force our hand. Um, that's not the only T square that's going on. We also have a Mercury Cazimi, which means that Mercury retrograde is going to be conjunct the Sun, and then we have another T square, a separate T square, um, between Saturn in Pisces and Venus in Virgo. Those are the two that form an opposition, with Jupiter and Mars in Gemini as the focal point. Now, this second T square talks about frequently feeling like we have to choose between our, in some cases, artistic practice, in some cases, spiritual practice, the regular disciplined use of whether it's intuition or altered states of consciousness or art or all of the above on the one hand, and wanting to relate to people that are practical and organized and thrifty and effective, and these two things already pull us in like two directions, because for example, to practice our art, to really encourage the creativity to flow, oftentimes we need to make sure that we can get as strange as we think of, or to not really have someone next to us judging us, criticizing our every move, so that it can truly flow, whether it's the intuition or the creativity. And especially with altered states of consciousness, sometimes it helps having someone next to us be our grounder, our anchor. But sometimes it gets in the way of properly achieving the altered state of consciousness. But and similarly, right, if we want to surround ourselves with, let's say, practical, organized people that are, thrifty, that try to keep things simple, make effective use of resources, it's hard to do that while we're trying to develop a spiritual practice that is probably going to take us to some strange places that are not thrifty and are not very practical. But that in itself is hard enough, so to speak. And then just to make matters more complicated, we have as an instigator Jupiter and Mars in Gemini. Jupiter does not like to be in Gemini. This is traditional astrological knowledge. Jupiter does not like to be in Gemini because Jupiter rules Sagittarius, which is the opposite of Gemini. In Sagittarius, Jupiter would see projects through from start to finish with an eye on the prize, not getting distracted. Gemini loves being distracted, is prone to distraction, is prone to trying just about everything along the way, making side stops and investigating things that have nothing to actually do with the project, and it actually slows down the project, or sometimes, in fact, the advice for handling a natal Jupiter in Gemini is to not sweat the fact that you probably won't be able to see things such as long time studies in a single go, but rather that you're gonna start, you're gonna have to pause it, and then you're gonna have to come back later on and keep going until you finish it. Well, similarly, we have that we want to be doing a lot of things with our hands. Our hands may be very active, or our mouths may be very active. Gemini is, after all, a sign of communication. And intellectually very curious, very active, very very chaotic in a sense as well. And that is the instigator that is between what I mentioned about trying to develop a spiritual practice through discipline, or an artistic practice through discipline, and relating to people that are organized and critical and thrifty, and just trying to improve the material effectiveness of it all. But there's a lot here about following the impulse, right? And especially following the impulse if it scares us or if it brings us pain, because in a sense, receiving negative backlash is going to be the sign that we did the right thing, actually, that we are in the right place, actually. So anyways, I was saying, impulse. Impulse seems to be the key between wanting to develop spiritual things, artistic things on the one hand, relate to more practical, organized people that are effective communicators, don't speak too much, don't speak too little, while trying to do both things with a really restless mind and very hyperactive hands and a very hyperactive mouth. Impulse. Impulse and instinct, especially those impulses and instincts that are true to you, true to your needs, true to your energy, but that bring conflict. Step in, do as much of what you want to or need to do as you can within the limited time frame. When it's over, don't fight it, put an end to it, move on to the rest. Because that's also part of what's happening here. We want to unite sea and sky, and the world of matter has limits. Time has limits. Material resources have limits. The capabilities of our physical bodies have limits. And so we let those decide. We do what we can, not based on intention, not based on desire, but based on what we can do at the moment. And then when it's time to break off, cut away, do just that. For some of us, this might be harder than for others, especially if you've spent a long time repressing your urges, repressing your instincts, saying no to those. For some of you, you might define them as aggressive tendencies, but really, looking at the other combinations, we have two triangles of ease. We have a triangle of opportunity and two triangles of ease. And both the triangle of opportunity and the first triangle of ease have as a focal point Chiron retrograde in Aries. And that is everything to do with going over our impulses, going over our initiative, and healing those places where we didn't use it appropriately, those places where we hesitated instead of acting, or those places where we felt the urge to act and just did it without thinking and brought issues upon ourselves. But with the energy that I'm seeing here, if it's action, if it's just action that is part of something that you have already been doing, then that is favorable. That is what you should do and not hesitate. If it is starting something new with incomplete information, this isn't the time. There's too many retrogrades at play at the same time. And I mentioned that this is the triangle of opportunity and one of the triangles of ease that have Chiron retrograde as the focal point. The other triangle of ease has, let me find it again. The other triangle of ease has Neptune retrograde as the focal point. So reviewing our intuitions, reviewing past inspirations is also something that'll move us forward in the changes that are happening in our lives. It isn't reason, it isn't intention, it isn't desire, it's material facts and drive and impulse and circumstances, really. So to play along with circumstances, definitely there is something here about relinquishing control, but in spite of having so many retrogrades going on at the same time, I'm counting at least 4 in my report, just sitting at home and avoiding is not the solution. Sitting at home and thinking is not the solution. Honoring your impulse, honoring your drive, that seems to be the way forward within the limited time frame of what material circumstances allow us, of course. But yeah. So I hope you have a wonderful full moon. I hope this lunation brings you many blessings, and I look forward to speaking with you all again in 2 weeks. Trashe.